You good for mic check? Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mic check. Does that sound good for you guys? Good? Are you good on white balance? All right. Good?
Mic check on this one. Doing a quick mic check on it. All right.
Is it? I think that'd be perfect, yeah. Let me know when you're ready for a mic check. Yeah, mic check, 1, 2, 3, mic check, 1, 2, 3, mic check. I got a white balance here too if you like it. I don't. Do you have a list of speakers?
It's not, yeah, there's more on it than that.
We're scheduled for 8. We'll be probably 5 to 10 minutes. We're still 5 to 10 minutes out, so I just want everybody to know that's what we're looking at. So as soon as we get everybody assembled, we'll begin.
Is there Robert down there trying to be a peacekeeper?
I'm just trying to be helpful. Take it down now for everybody. Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I check, so I know who's here, I see KGW. Did you get coin?
I don't think points there.
No coin?
So,
Are we ready? I just want to start out by thanking the media for being here this morning. I know many of you had a long night, like many of us. I'm Lieutenant Tina Jones, Public Information Officer for the Portland Police Bureau. We are here today to talk about the unprecedented events that happened in our city last night. We want to start out by providing some remarks about what happened last night. We've got a list of speakers, and I'll go through that. We'll have some time for some questions, and then we would invite media to come with us as we take a brief tour and survey of the city downtown. I would like to correct one small thing that I learned after I sent the press release out. I learned that we actually have 2 officers who sustained minor injury and 1 criminalist, so that is a correction from that. So I'd like that reflected, please. Our speakers today will be as follows. Mayor Ted Wheeler, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, Portland Police Bureau Acting Chief Chris Davis, Portland Fire and Rescue Chief Sarah Boone, Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese, Senior Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez, Pastor Matt Hennessy, Pastor Edie Mondane, and then after that we will take some questions. So first, I would like to introduce Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. I want to start off by acknowledging that this has been an incredibly difficult and painful week for this country. And I also want to acknowledge that I haven't quite got the words right yet to express exactly how I feel and what I'm thinking as I rode through our city this morning. I feel conflicted in many ways, and in the conversations I've had throughout the night and the early morning hours with many of you, you feel that conflict as I do. There was a pain that erupted into violence in our city last night. Many are waking up now, all across the country, not just here in Portland, but all across the country, and seeing their cities burned, looted, and torn apart. That's shocking. That's not something we're familiar with here in Portland, not the scale of the damage that I saw coming down through the center of the city this morning. And it's not something that other cities are necessarily familiar with. But let's be clear. What happened last night in Portland and across the country did not happen in a vacuum. I don't condone what happened in Portland last night, and you all know that about me. I have said on so many occasions from this podium and other podiums from which I've spoken that I do not believe that violence or vandalism is the means to a political end, and I still believe that this morning. I don't condone what happened in Portland last night, and I do not tolerate it. But there's more. And here's the important part of what is a deeply moral conflict. This isn't just about damage or graffiti or fires or broken storefronts or lost product. That's not really what this is about. That's what people are seeing and that's what's being reported on this morning. But we have to honestly acknowledge that yesterday's events boiled over into anger and frustration and rage all across this great nation. We need to take a long look in the mirror and be truthful about what we see in ourselves and in our nation's institutions of power, including right here in Portland, Oregon, where I am very privileged to serve as your mayor. People of color, especially black men, have fought for generations to exercise their God-given rights and to be valued as equals amongst men. Yet time and time again, they are reminded that the very institutions that are supposed to protect those rights and support the people of this nation instead fail them and deny them their basic rights, and all too often even their very lives. That's not the America that I know. That's not the America that I love. That's not what so many people gave so much for over many generations. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, many activists all across the United States and all around the globe. And the murder of George Floyd underscored the stark reality of the day-to-day existence of being black in America and how far we have yet to go. And it's that reality, the reality of how far we have yet to go to realize Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s beloved community. It's from that deep well of frustration and anger and disappointment that yesterday's actions arose from. Yes, there was a riot in Portland, Oregon last night. I declared it as such. And that is not something that we can tolerate. But again, by the same token, this cannot be a conversation just about damage or goods or services. I want to remind you how yesterday started. It started with powerful and peaceful vigils and demonstrations, calling out and speaking truth to the murder of George Floyd and so many other black men and women in our country over so many years. And those vigils repeatedly called for justice on one hand and accountability on the other. And not just from police officers, but from all of us in this society who have the privilege of power and leadership and the ability to change direction when we need to change direction. They called on all of us to see the humanity in each other and to honor the fullness of the lives of George Floyd and other black people who've been needlessly killed. This cannot stand. There must be meaningful and lasting change to racist institutions that continue to deeply wound the black community. Any injustice in this nation is an injustice to the people here in our community. And that's why you saw such widespread action yesterday. There was no community in this country that could escape the reality. In conclusion, I want to say this. I see the deep wounds all around us. I see those wounds. And I see and I acknowledge the systematic racism that has destroyed countless black families in our community and in our nation. I see the deep pain, further exacerbated by a pandemic that has already destroyed so many people's hopes and dreams and loved ones. I feel it deeply, and I stand side by side with other black leaders, our city leaders, our public servants, you, to continue doing everything that we can to heal and to reform. So this morning, as we pick up the broken glass, the question is on all of our lips. Whether it's black men in Portland who feel this dawning realization that the path towards true justice is longer than they could have imagined, to the shop owners and operators who wake up this morning to a new economic reality. Things were already nearly impossible before the COVID's economic impacts took hold, and now for many of them, it's going to be even harder. I cannot condone last night's violence. I cannot stand by and watch our city be destroyed. I cannot stand by and watch buildings be set aflame while people are still in them. And I won't. I will not tolerate that, and I will not condone that. But nor will I stand silent as men like George Floyd are murdered by the very institutions that are supposed to protect them and serve them and our communities at large. Both of these things can be true simultaneously. And this morning, that is how I am thinking about how to resolve the deep sense of moral conflict that I feel this morning. We need to heal as a city, and we need to heal as a country. This is a tipping point, make no mistake about it. You know it's true. This is a national reckoning. We have to choose which path we want to follow. But we cannot begin the healing process if we continue to wound each other. So, enough of the violence. We must take this opportunity to overcome whatever differences divide us as a society so that we can move forward together. And as your mayor, I will redouble my efforts. I will do whatever it takes to close that divide so that we can move forward together, so that the next generation, including my daughter and your children, can grow up in a very different society, one that Dr. King called the beloved community. Portland, we can get there, and we can show others how to get there. We can do this, and we're going to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Next, I would like to introduce Commissioner Joanne Hardesty.
I appreciate you all being here today, but I first want to start with my appreciation for Mayor Wheeler. All of us, when we're facing losing a parent, need to really be focused on what's best to care for our parent. And it is unfortunate that he had to come back to the mess that happened last night. And so I just want to appreciate the fact that if I had been him, I would have stayed with my family and trust that the rest of us would have had his back. So I just really appreciate that. Let me say that Mayor Wheeler, yesterday started off as a day of reflection. It started off as a day of truth. It started as a day of acknowledging for too long black bodies have been disposable in the United States of America. There are many, many, many activities that took place that were peaceful, that were clear, that were direct. I'm going to divert from the mayor a little because I believe that there was a small group of people who came out last night with every intention of tearing stuff up, and they were going to tear it up no matter how many of them there were. I saw remarkable courage that we've seen over and over and over again by people who are continually damaged by their government. But I want to be crystal clear. What happened last night had nothing to do with Black America. It was not about standing up for black people's rights. It was not about acknowledging the death and harm that has been taking place. It was merely a small group of people who decided that here's a great opportunity for us to steal stuff and break stuff. I want those people prosecuted. I want them found. I will help go through the video if need be to make sure that anybody that we can identify, that we prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. This city council, your city council, has been working night and day since the pandemic begun to try to help this community deal with the health crisis that we're in, knowing that black and brown people die at astronomical rates from COVID-19. That's where we've put our energy. That's where we've put our strength. And then for some small group of individuals to decide, at the moment we're about to open back up again for business, let's just bust up all the businesses and steal all the stuff. That is inexcusable. Our community, all of us, will suffer long term because of that selfishness. I want to talk to the people, though, who understand protest, understand how to speak truth to power, understand the difference between right and wrong. I'm talking to you now. It is imperative that you are not silent. Silence is acceptance, and I will not accept that we need justice for black people at the expense of tearing up our community. We can do both. We can get justice for black people, but we don't have to destroy our community to do it. We at the City Council have been trying to figure out, with all the tens of thousands of people unemployed in Portland, what are we going to do? How can we help them? And thanks to some stupidity last night, we can add 10,000 or more people to the unemployment list. Not the city I want to live in. Not the kind of activity I would stand behind, ever. I've always been for nonviolent, direct action. And I will leave you with this quote. Since this is the Dr. King quote day, I will not remember the words of my enemy, but the silence of my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Next, I would like to introduce Acting Chief Chris Davis.
Well, good morning. I'm Deputy Chief Chris Davis with the Portland Police Bureau. Last night will go down as one of the worst nights in the city of Portland's history. This evening began with a peaceful gathering in Peninsula Park, which turned into a march with several hundred people participating. During the march, some of the demonstrators started to engage in criminal activity on the way down Martin Luther King Boulevard, breaking windows and causing damages to businesses along the way. At one point in the march, there was a person in a vehicle who we believe may have been shot by a demonstrator. This person suffered a graze wound and has been treated and released. And we are actively investigating this incident. Based upon the criminal activity and violent acts that were occurring that we started to see, we were concerned about children who were still in the crowd and started to notify people to leave with their children. When several hundred demonstrators arrived downtown, the Multnomah County Justice Center was attacked. Windows were broken, a fire was set inside while there were people working in the building, as well as adults in custody. This put lives at risk and began a series of escalating attacks on businesses throughout downtown Portland. These violent and criminal actions being committed left us with no other option besides using force to disperse what had become an unlawful assembly and eventually a riot. Members of the crowd proceeded to target other locations, break windows, and cause further damage. We requested mutual aid to assist us with taking emergency police calls citywide. We sincerely appreciate our partners with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, the Port of Portland Police Department, the Gresham Police Department, and the Washington County Sheriff's Office for their assistance during this critical incident. We know what sparked the original demonstration, and we provided space for those who needed to express grief, and that was the right thing to do. Now, we'll have business owners, public employees, and community members who will be traumatized by the reckless and destructive acts that we witnessed last night. The mass destruction we saw last night in our city is unacceptable. Anger at the police is one thing, we're used to that, but destroying our city is another. We know our community as a whole does not condone mass destruction, and in the coming days we'll be increasing our police presence, not to target anyone, but just to help provide that sense of security that we all have a right to in our community. We'll be leaning on our outside agency and other city government partners, and we'll be working with our community to restore safety, and we'll be doing everything within our lawful authority to identify those responsible for this destruction and make arrests so that our criminal justice system can hold them accountable. We will need our community's help. The investigations into those who participated in arson, riot, attempted murder, and other serious criminal charges has begun. We will do everything we can to identify and hold accountable those responsible for these and other crimes, and we ask our community to come forward with tips. Public safety is a shared responsibility. I want to be very clear. We condemn what we saw in our city last night. This behavior is completely contrary to our values as Portlanders, and we will not tolerate it. I want to sincerely thank the men and women of the Portland Police Bureau, both our sworn officers and our professional staff, for their bravery and their selfless service last night in the face of incredible danger and violence. I also want to thank our partners in the Portland Fire Bureau who rushed into harm's way with our officers to put out fires. Further, I want to again thank our outside agency partners who came to our aid yet again when the chips were down. Finally, I want to thank the overwhelming majority of Portlanders whom we know would never participate in such wanton and reckless destruction. We know we have your support, and we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Davis. Next, I would like to introduce Portland Fire and Rescue Chief Sarah Boone.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Boone, Fire Chief of Portland Fire and Rescue. What I want to say is my number one priority is the protection of this community, all communities that make up the city of Portland. It doesn't matter your economic status. It doesn't matter your lot in life. It doesn't matter your hardships. But I can tell you where my heart lies. It lies in the city, and it lies in protecting all lives. And last night, this is the city I grew up in. This is a city I've served for 25 years. I'm standing here because I entrusted my life to others and dedicated my life to service in the Fire Bureau. And as the fire chief, I have lives entrusted to me. What happened last night, when it comes to criminal acts, damaging of property, vandalism of businesses, intentional arson, you have put so many lives in harm's way. I want to thank our public safety partners. This city is not burned down because of the collaboration, the training, and the dedication of the civil servants of this city. Our members put their lives in harm's way in order to keep these fires small, in order to save lives. This was a traumatic experience for everybody, for everyone. But I want people to understand, when we talk about trauma, when we talk about fear, when we talk about nobody is there to protect us, that's what Black people feel every single day. Whether you're going to a grocery store, whether you're raising a child, whether you're walking across the street, whether you walk into City Hall, you have already been targeted. You have already been marginalized. You walk in fear because of the color of your skin. So this is not about one killing or one moment or where we are today. If you really want to help understand and change a system that we have been living in since the day we got here, see the world through our eyes, through Black and brown people, our perspective. Because what a lot of us felt last night, when it comes to government workers, when it comes to civil servants, when it comes to people who are protected, they felt fear. That's what our kids feel every day, going to school, that they're not good enough, that maybe if they act out or do something, they are labeled and stamped for the rest of their life. So this is a moment. It is a moment of reckoning. It is a moment where we come together and understand that if we go forward, we're no longer going forward in fear and trauma. We are going forward together to create an actual community where respect and dignity are our core values. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Boone. When you spoke, it occurred to me that some of the unsung heroes last night were our 911 emergency dispatchers, our call takers who took frantic calls for many, many hours and monitored the radio nets and provided information for everyone who was working, both fire and police and medical staff. And we just deeply and greatly want to share our regard for our 911 employees who were also behind the scenes but on the front lines with us last night. Our next guest is Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese.
Thank you. I want to thank Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Hardesty for their heartfelt and candid remarks. The pain that this community feels because of the events in Minneapolis and the death of Mr. Floyd are real. I agree with Commissioner Hardesty that we had peaceful events yesterday that were the right way to protest, the right way to share outrage and pain, and that a small group of people took advantage of those situations and the pain and engaged in tumultuous activity that damaged our community severely. Rioting, looting, and arson are never justifiable. Last night at the Justice Center, we had non-sworn professional staff working in our Corrections Records Division. Their work is essential. They're there 24/7, 365 days a year. They're the backbone of our organization, allowing our corrections deputies, our deputy sheriffs, and other staff to do their good work. As they're sitting at their workstations, they had pieces of concrete the size of softballs come through windows at them. Devices were used to ram through windows, and people came into their workspaces and set them on fire, putting them in grave danger, as well as the adults in our custody, who we feel a deep sense of obligation for their safety. Today, our Multnomah County Sheriff's Office Rapid Response Team, assisted by the Port of Portland and the Gresham Police Department, is working with the Portland Police Bureau in securing the Justice Center. In addition to that, our East County Major Crimes Team is working with the Portland Police Bureau Detective Unit to investigate the crimes that happened last night to hold people accountable. This could have had tragic consequences for many, many people in our city, including our public servants. And last night, seeing the true fear in the faces of our non-sworn professional staff that had to be evacuated out of the building and then escorted out of the building to the safety of their vehicles or their homes. As a leader, it hurt to see that, and the people I'm responsible for their safety, as well as the community's safety, was severely damaged. Obviously, the Justice Center has sustained severe damage. This will impact our ability and the DA's ability and the court's ability to function there for the short term. We have victims of domestic violence that use that facility for restraining orders. We have arraignment courts that happen there and other court processes that are going to be displaced and interrupted in the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff Reese. Next, we have Senior Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez.
Good morning. I'd like to first say thank you to Mayor Wheeler for being here today and for hosting this event. I sincerely appreciate your presence. My name is Nathan Vasquez, and I'm a Senior Deputy District Attorney in the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. And I head up and lead our Strategic Prosecution and Services Unit. First, I'd like to say the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office proudly supports and encourages peaceful events and vigils, just as the ones that Commissioner Hardesty attended and spoke at yesterday. There is righteousness in the rage over the death of George Floyd, but we cannot allow that indignation and fury to fuel destructive and unlawful behavior like we saw last night and early this morning. We will not ignore calls for change. We have a duty to our community to be advocates for justice, to be advocates for all victims, no matter the color of their skin. But being an advocate for justice requires us not to allow impunity when individuals intentionally and knowingly and recklessly engage in violent behavior that destroys property, endangers the lives of our community members, just as we saw last night. The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office will continue to review and carefully prosecute all cases in this event. We will follow the appropriate charging procedures as outlined under Oregon law, and this office will ensure that the rule of law is applied fairly and evenly. As I mentioned earlier, we support and encourage peaceful demonstrations. Portland and Multnomah County, we have a proud history of just doing that. And we hope moving forward that what we saw last night and early this morning will not define us as a community. We hope that, as Mayor Wheeler said, we move forward with a productive, passionate, and useful conversation about how we heal this city, this community, and this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Next, we have Pastor E.D. Mondane.
Mayor Wheeler, we are so grateful to have such a servant like you in times like these. While it remains salient to point out that the institutional racism and police brutality that led Portlanders to demonstrate in the first place yesterday, the self-concern, the casual destruction, and the self-righteous determination to put others in harm's way that was on display last night in this city does absolutely nothing to honor the legacy of George Floyd or to improve the systemic problems that led to his murder. The NAACP as an organization and I as pastor are calling for an approach with the spirit of an ecumenical heart moving forward. The focus of our rage must be centered on a collaborative, nonviolent determination to engage in effective activism that actually improves the circumstances that have so enraged us. Destructive acts that hamper the progress of our cause can only be committed by those who do not truly care about preventing further George Floyd's or too ignorant to know better. To our non-black allies, do not commit violence in our name. To my black brothers and sisters, turn away from the destructive, well-understood emotions that drive our rage and summon the strength of will to solve the problems we're raging against. Beloved, racism is real. It is persuasive. It is systemic. And it has been institutionalized. And it is killing my people. But what I saw on the local news last night, and today as I was coming here to this great house, did nothing to ease my sorrows. Leaders and all people of all faiths must right now and get ready do the soul searching necessary to arrive at an answer as to how we will all move forward together. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor. Our final speaker is Pastor Matt Hennessy.
Good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you to Lieutenant Jones for her managing this conference this morning. I want to say thank you to our mayor for coming back, for caring about his city, for caring about the people of this city. I'm grateful deeply in my heart for that. I show up. My name is J.W. Matt Hennessy. I'm the pastor of the historic Vancouver Avenue First Baptist Church here in Portland. I am the co-chair of the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and share that position with the Reverend Linda Jaramillo. And also we have our president, Jan Elfers, who's here. I'm also grateful for the faith leaders who could make it here today. My friends, this is America's unfinished business. This unfinished business is not just the work of the black community. It is the work of all communities. I am grateful for Commissioner Hardesty and for Apostle Mondane and the work that they did to bring together people yesterday in Terry Shrunk Park. Peaceful, poignant, and important. I am grateful for those who brought together, those who assembled at Peninsula Park last night. I was there, right by the gazebo. Could have gotten up and spoken. I needed to hear the hearts of those who were not me. I needed to hear the hearts of the millennials, the hearts of the troubled, and for them to speak, and I was so grateful. Mayor Willer, I was so proud of your Office of Youth Violence Prevention. 90 plus of us were on the phone yesterday on the Zoom call, and we got to hear the heart-wrenching hurt, especially of black men. And I'm grateful for Pastor Green for the work that she's doing and the convening that occurred. And today would not be right if we did not acknowledge the hurt and the pain that black men and black people in general feel. It is real. Often, and it's important for me to say this, it is important to say that we heard you, that we see you, because on too many occasions, whether it's walking down the street or standing in an elevator, when people see us show up, this may sound trivial to many of you. It's a lived experience for many of us, how people will hold on to their purse when they see us, how they will not speak in the elevator and get mighty interested in the numbers of the floors above. That is a reality. And we teach our children and grandchildren that when they get in the car, whether they're driving or they're with others, how they must conduct themselves. I have said on too many occasions, on Memorial Day morning at 2:30 in the morning, I got a call, as many faith leaders do, that one of my leaders passed away. I don't get off the phone and pray. I go to their house. But I also know that it has been my practice at 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning when I leave the church, or 3 in the morning when I left this morning, to make sure that I put cruise control even if the speed limit is 35, because I do not want to lose my life if I am stopped. Now, for many people that may sound weird and strange. It's a reality. We stand in solidarity not only with the Floyd family, but with every family that has had to deal with the scourge of racism. And let me say, I also pray for an officer who can be as cold-hearted as to have his knee on somebody's neck for that long, and for people to push that person to let him go, to hear the pleads of the man on the ground, and his expression never changes, and that nearly 3 minutes afterwards, he's still there. I am concerned about what we saw play out. I was grateful for the beautiful crowd that showed up at Peninsula Park. It was beautiful. It was Portland at our finest. As I said to a couple of people who asked me how I felt they did when they spoke, I said, great, you just cuss a little bit too much. But it was great. What they were sharing was their pain, and that pain is real. I have to tell you one other thing that's important. I heard criticism of the Portland Police Bureau last night. I was very disappointed to hear that. The Portland Police Bureau knows I've lived in this city more than half my life, 32 years. I have been a critic of the Police Bureau, but I have also stood with them when they're right. The Portland Police Bureau listened to us in our meetings about mass demonstrations. We are the ones, we, the community, are the ones who said, when we have demonstrations, please don't show up as much. Because when you show up, it causes people to feel very triggered just by your presence. The Portland Police Bureau called and talked and communicated with a number of people yesterday. And when they did that, they said, here's what we're going to do. And when I hear criticism that they showed up too late or they weren't on time for this, that, or the other, that is not fair. I take responsibility. I was in those rooms last year and the year before last when we were talking about mass demonstrations, and I too said, when you all show up, it changes the dynamic of everything. They laid back. They couldn't have had a clue with a peaceful demonstration in Terry Trunk Park, a peaceful demonstration at Peninsula Park. They couldn't have had a clue that it was going to go weird downtown. But I know evil when I see it. You know evil when you see it. Those who came and did the looting downtown could not be people who care about this city, who care about human life. And let me be absolutely clear, you sure don't you don't represent me as a black person. Violence is never the way. Many people have said, and I respect the perspective of those who say, young people who say, Pastor, we tried it your way. If peaceful demonstration was the right way, why are we still dealing with the mess of today? There's some saliency to what they say. But I refuse to believe that violence is the right way. I refuse to believe that division is the right way. I believe that it is important that we work together. If Martin Luther King could meet with Bull Connor and sit down with the Grand Wizard of the KKK, we can learn how to live and work with those that we may feel are our enemy. So today, I'm going to beg you for two things. Don't go home and do things business as usual. I want you to teach your children and grandchildren that black people and brown people and other people all have the same citizenship rights. There is unfinished business to do. You and I must do it. When you get on the elevator, quit looking up, because we're pretty friendly people. Even walking down the street, I speak to everybody, but it blows me away how many white people will not even look in my direction when I speak. That's my city. But I beg you to look at your brother and sister who doesn't look like you. Nod if you can't speak. Acknowledge that they are there. And my friends, what I know is together we will work this out. I pledge my support. I pledge the support of these faith leaders who are here. And I know very well, Mr. Mayor, you can depend on us. This isn't the end of our conversation. This is just a continuation of our conversation. And there's work to be done. And this unfinished business belongs to us. Let's not leave it for our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. We have time for some questions from media. I know it's a little awkward and cumbersome with the distancing, but I don't know if you want to state who your question is for, and then we can maneuver around like we're doing an awkward dance, I suppose.
I have a question either for the mayor or for the acting police chief. It's kind of in regards to what Pastor Hennessy said about that more maybe limited police approach at the start. I was wondering if someone could explain that, and then maybe if this makes you think you might want to change that later based on what happened. I know it's kind of a broad
and I'm
question.
sorry, what is your
Oh,
name?
I'm Amber with KPTV.
Amber? Okay, I believe that might be for the chief.
That was a long one. I apologize.
That's okay. Can you,
Oh, do you want me to repeat it again?
would you please?
Okay, yeah, it's kind of just in response to the initial police presence for the march, and then how, I know Pastor Hennessy was saying it was more limited but because that's how they ask, but then kind of what happened, if this is going to change things in the future, or?
Well, there's a tendency to want to conflate a protest with what we saw last night, and I want to be really clear that those are two completely different things. We had two protests involving, in one case, hundreds of people right across the street here, and another one with so many people, well over 1,000, that there was a traffic jam trying to get into the park, and the vast majority of those people were not involved in what we saw downtown. So I would say, it's always complicated trying to forecast what you might encounter with a large public gathering, whatever it is, whether it's a protest event, a sporting event, a concert, but no, we aren't going to have any more aggressive police response at protests. That's not the way to prevent what happened last night, and you don't prevent what happened last night by over-policing free speech events.
How do you just say overpolicing is what got us into this mess? So why would we want to continue that?
Well, my question would be, how do we prevent riots of this nature? And, to follow up, I think there's been some online criticism, and certainly I've heard people saying that they feel like this is the chickens come home to roost, and that this is, relentless drive. Say, what's your response to that?
Well, I'll tell you that I will personally take responsibility for the approach that the Portland Police Bureau took to the events yesterday. No one could have predicted what we saw last night, given the information that we had in advance. The way we try to prevent what we saw last night is we try to reach out to organizers. We try to reach out to all the organizers of the different groups that come together to engage in free speech activity and ask them to manage their events well. But, unfortunately, there are times, and we have seen this many times in this city and in others, that a small group of people shows up and takes one of these otherwise perfectly legitimate events in a direction its organizers never intended for it to go. So really, the way to prevent that is to do the harder work up front and try to separate those elements from the crowd that are bent on destruction from the rest of it. And we can't do that, especially when the focus of that protest is the police. So, I'm not going to fault the organizers of the event last night, because that's a really difficult task. And frankly, we don't know how many of the people who ended up downtown were even at the event in Peninsula Park. So, it is an extremely difficult thing to predict when we're going to have this kind of violence. We have over 300 protest events a year in this city where nothing like this ever happens. So, we certainly do the best that we can, but these are events where we are limited by the information we're able to gather in advance in terms of forecasting what will happen. And then we make our plans based on the information that we have.
I say this with all respect. I'm trying to predict what was going to happen last night. Obviously, there is no way to tell the future, but we did see in other cities across the country this play out for days ahead of
There was, and that's why we had dedicated crowd control resources available. We just didn't use them in Peninsula Park because we knew that it was possible that something like this would happen. So normally our rapid response team, if we called them all in from home or probably about 2 hours away, they were here. They just weren't in Peninsula Park to cover us in case we needed them in that contingency.
Did you have the staff you needed last night to respond properly?
We did.
Chief, why did it take so long for certain of the rioting, certain of the unsecured buildings to get a police presence? It felt like, I was there last night, it felt like at times people hit the Apple store, they hit it again, it got, it was robbed maybe 3 different times a week. So what happened there?
Well, what we saw last night was a large enough group of people that was able to break up into smaller but still effective groups, go do things like hit multiple businesses at once, set fires in multiple places at once, then come back together or add more people and commit violence someplace else. A big part of or a big question that we have in the investigation of this event is to what extent was that coordinated, because it was a fairly organized appearing effort, and we're very early in the investigation, so I don't want to make a lot of assumptions about how this group that came down here was able to engage in those hit and run multiple location tactics, but that's certainly not something that we've seen a whole lot of in the past on that scale in this city.
Was there any way to stop the looters once it had already begun?
So I'm surprised all the questions are around policing, and it's not about the pain community members are feeling, right? It's annoying me just sitting here. This is not, it didn't start because police did or didn't do anything, right? It's about the community's pain and our inaction over the years, right? So I don't know why all the questions are about policing. And for someone who is a strong long-term critic of the police, I actually think they did an excellent job last night, right? And really being mild and really being measured in when they approach. But this is not about policing strategy. We will talk about policing strategy another day. This is about how do you heal a community that has consistently been damaged over and over and over again, right? And I think the media could do a much better job of not trying to make it so simple, right? Life is not black and white. There's a lot of gray and white, right? And I think with your desire to be quick, what you do is just take one little piece and you run with it, right? This community has been in pain for decades. Where have you been?
I'm here. I'm from here.
Right? Decades. Over and over and over again. Right? And now we're going to sit here and talk about police. What should the police have done? Did we have the right? This is not the conversation I have, okay?
I respect that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you.
Are there any questions about the pain that our community has experienced? Because we have community members that can answer that.
So
You can always call the police bureau and talk about their tactics and strategy.
we can, and I 100% understand what you're saying and appreciate your feedback. This is also an opportunity for us to ask questions that we know we can call them, and we will, but it's hard to get in contact with them, especially on the weekends. So there are just some factual questions that we are trying to get answered and out of the way.
I appreciate that. I just want you to know, if I'm feeling this and I'm sitting in this room, and I know the pain my community has been feeling for decades, if I'm feeling this by the tone of your questions, I suspect your audience is also.
And I apologize if that's the way that you're feeling. Part of our job is to hold authorities accountable, and that is partly what we're trying to do. I could sit here all day and ask you guys questions, and I hope we get that opportunity to. I just think we want
I
to
won't
get
be
these
here all day.
questions.
I'm leaving in a few minutes because I got other stuff.
I
Believe it or
understand.
not, I've been up all night. I got other stuff I got to do. But I think this is a good learning opportunity, right? When the media shows up, the media's focus is very, very narrow. And you can help us educate the people who don't understand what's going on by actually being more thoughtful in what you present. I'll give you a great example. There were 2 young African-American men who were one of the hundreds of looters at Apple. But I only saw those 2 African-American men's picture repeated over and over and over again last night. And I thought to myself, what is going to be the picture of the riot that happened downtown last night? And guess what? When you have seen one picture for 4 hours playing nonstop, that's the picture that you're giving to the public. But that's not reality, right? I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at anybody that asked the question. But I just want you to know I am frustrated because you're focused on something that, A, we've never had a riot of this proportion. So policing strategy notwithstanding, it wasn't about what the police did or didn't do. It's about what we didn't do as a community, as government, as responsible parties, actually to represent the people in our community. All right?
I would just like to say that we've been airing this entire news conference live on TV this whole time, and we have heard all of the incredible and wonderful things that you've said. And in many ways, you guys were able to provide that voice and those answers to the community for the past 40 minutes.
Right.
And so now we are just trying to get questions that we didn't touch on, that we didn't hear already.
I appreciate that. My frustration is I've actually been around for a while, right? It's been a long week for black people. I hope it's been a long week for everybody, right? Just black people, right? But when I sit here and I see how narrow the questions are, after all the speakers who spoke, I think media should check themselves and figure out what is the message you want the public to have, right? Because you can help us. We need you desperately to educate the public about what is really going on and what the underlying issue is. But when I see 2 young black men, I actually turned to somebody and said, I bet those 2 young men will be in custody today. And all the story will be about these 2 young African-American men that had Apple computers. But they only had 2. But their picture was run over and over and over.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardison.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor Wheeler, can we ask you a few questions? Since
Yeah.
you're here, I appreciate you coming back. And I am sorry to hear about your mother, so thank you for coming back during this time.
Yeah, and thank you while we're on that subject. I just want to set the record perfectly straight because I think there was a lot of confusion. I was not with my mother yesterday. My mother is in hospice care here in Portland. I was with my family, and we were discussing next steps for my mother. So I know there was some confusion as to whether I was with my mother, whether I left my mother. That was not the case, just to clarify the record.
Mayor Wheeler, do you have actionable items for people in this community to do starting today to move forward? We were talking about what we can do next and next steps beyond just a response last night. What are actionable things that you want to see this community do today?
So I hope the first thing that everybody got out of each and every one of the speakers was there is a profound difference between the right to assembly, the right to free speech, the expression of the anger and the frustration that many people are feeling around this nation on one hand, and committing acts of violence and vandalism and breaking the law on the other. And we heard that uniformly from each and every speaker. And so I hope that in our city, which is a very progressive city and a city that has long protected and supported and fought for First Amendment rights, not just for people here in our community, but nationally, that we will be as strong in our voice opposing vandalism and violence as we are in supporting free speech and assembly rights. And sometimes I feel that there is an imbalance there. Number 2, I want to respond to the broader question of the police. I hope the public supports our first responders, and not just the police bureau. The fire bureau was also out there in force last night. And the work that they do is extremely difficult. It is often thankless. It requires tremendous on-the-spot judgment calls. I have come to find as the police commissioner that at least when it comes to policing, there's usually 2 flavors of criticism. Either the police did too much or the police did not do enough. And it's a rare day when people say they did just right. When they do just right, nobody notices, and that's the 300 some odd protests or demonstrations that Deputy Chief Davis mentioned a few moments ago. I would encourage people to also break out of their comfort zone. And Pastor Hennessy alluded to this earlier. We are a city that just demographically happens to be a very white city. It is. And so I would encourage all of us to break out of our typical and comfortable associations and seek those opportunities to engage with people who are different from us, or who have different lived experience, or even have completely different philosophies or political beliefs than we do. And I'm very concerned that as a society we are not intentionally seeking those opportunities, but in fact we are doing the opposite. We are shying away from and almost protecting ourselves from those opportunities. Here in Portland, there are many opportunities for engagement around tables, either through our faith community, through the City of Portland and the Office of Youth Violence Prevention. We heard about a table that was set yesterday that included about 100 people sharing different experiences and different perspectives on how to improve our community. And I would encourage people to contact us and get involved in those types of things. I also have another concrete step. Today, a lot of businesses are going to be in rebuilding mode. They already were with COVID. Let's show some love for our local businesses. I know that this has been a banner a couple of months for Amazon.com, good for them, but can we also bring some of those dollars home to our community and to particularly the men and women who locally operate small businesses? They're getting killed by this COVID crisis. And the growth of online commerce relative to what's happening in our community is really disappointing. I would ask people to support local businesses as they reopen. Obviously, be smart about it, given the COVID crisis. But let's not move wholesale lock, stock, and barrel online for our purchases, because if we do not support our local business community, it will not be able to survive. Those are just some of the things that come to mind to me today.
Given the time, if we're going to go take a bit of a tour, it's going to be a little difficult. But for those of you who would like to join us, who would like to at least go take a look at the damage at the Justice Center and then their Pioneer Square. I thank you all for joining.
I know that was it. I just didn't mean to disrespect. Viewers ask us, and so we have to push it out to you guys. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,